Hello and welcome to this iniBuilds video. So it's been a while since we've made one of these, but that's because we've been hard at work working on what you see in front of you now, the A300-600 Super Transporter, or as it's better known, the Beluga. Now before we jump into the changes and what we've done to bring this really interesting aircraft to life in the sim, I want to talk about the history of the Beluga. Why does it look like this? Where did it come from? And why on earth is it still flying now if it's based on an A300, which is a reasonably old airframe for Airbus to be using in-house? So let's talk a little bit about that. So back in the early 90s, Airbus realized that they had a bit of a production problem, really, that they were still using the Super Guppy transport aircraft, which was, again, a little bit embarrassing that it was based on a Boeing. So every single Airbus that flew had its wings and all of its components that were flown around the supply network in a Boeing. And I think by the 90s, Airbus had got to a point where they thought, I think we need to do this in a different manner. So they put a contract up. Now this is one of the misconceptions is the Beluga built by Airbus? Kind of. It's a bit of both, really. So they put a contract up and they said, we want to move this stuff from these places to this place and put your designs forward. So some companies put a proposal forward with an Antonov 124, a very heavy lift Russian cargo transport aircraft. They weren't too happy with that really because it couldn't fit the super oversized loads that they asked. One other company put forward a design with a C-17. Very nice design, but again, modifying a very expensive military aircraft. It wasn't really what they were looking for. Now a company called SITA, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, they proposed the Beluga. So Airbus never designed the Beluga, but SITA were the one that said, look, we can take one of your existing airframes and turn it into this. Now when you look at the Beluga and the Super Guppy, you can see that they are most definitely, I would say, inspired by each other, because there are multiple different ways to sort of approach the issue of carrying massively oversized cargo, and they take a similar approach. The Super Guppy being the front swivels off, with the Beluga being that the nose opens up and the flight deck cranks down, as you can see it there, really quite low to the ground to allow that load to go in. And they won the contract and they partnered with Airbus to build the aircrafts in Toulouse. Now, you might say, well, why wouldn't Airbus just build them? Well, it's a very small production run. They never ever intended the Beluga to sell. They just needed it to move their stuff around. So it's like a car company building a van to move its own parts around. Are they really going to care about the little details on the edge? No, they don't care. And that's reflected throughout the entire design, and you'll see that. And that's what makes it fascinating. Just first and foremost, that is what makes it interesting to fly, operate and simulate. So SITA and Airbus came together. They took the existing components of an A300 freighter. Now remember, in the 90s they could have used an A330, but they were brand new and it were very expensive, and modifying an A330 would have been a much bigger task than modifying an A300, which by the way was the only pure freighter aircraft they made. And think about that, because it was 2009 or 2010 when the A330 freighter came out. So it was by far the most logical choice to pick. They modified it. The components that stayed the same are the wing, the gear, the main gear, the nose gear is different, the flight deck sort of cockpit section, but aft of that is different. You can see the sort of swan neck, and a little bit of the rear. I'll try and put an image up here so you can see it. And the rest of it is just basically new. I've read somewhere, I can't quite get my head around what component of it is, but maybe it'll make sense if you see it yourself, that apparently the fin, part of it is from an A340, which is quite interesting. And they added the stabilizers onto the end of the THS to give it more stability for the bizarre shape that made it. So basically, the wings, the engines, the main gear, the cockpit, and the rest is just entirely new. Now, that's a little bit of a history about the Beluga, and I want to just talk about what we've done to bring the Beluga into the sim. Looking at the Beluga, what has been changed from our base A300 to make it the Beluga that you see in front of us? Well, in fact, we did more than Airbus. Now, there you go. That's that's an achievement right there. So SITA and Airbus, like I said, they reuse some of the common components. The only part of the Beluga that you see in front of you that shares a common element with our original A300 is the landing gear and the wings. The rest is entirely new. The flight deck has had massive 3D changes throughout, which we're going to go through once we get in there. The outside, as you can see, it's a really, really accurate recreation of the Beluga with, we're going to get to it again, it's a fully modelled interior. So just get a bit excited for that. Everything else is new. Because, frankly, it's better to just do a fresh sheet start on something that's this complex of a design to get it right. And it looks, I think, fantastic. It's you can see that you've got the weathering on the sort of where the bulge comes out and all this sort of stuff. It's a really, really great 3D model, and we're really pleased with it. The engines, you might say, well, why didn't you reuse those? They're the ones from the 310. So we modified, obviously, to make them match what should be on the Beluga, but the 3D work is from our latest generation 3D technology that we're bringing from the A310. So let's get in the flight deck and talk about the changes. Alright, you join me in the flight deck of the Beluga. Now, what I want to do is I want to go over what we've changed in a sort of quick list, and then we'll go through it slowly but surely as we look through the rest of the aircraft, because I feel like it's best to just list it right now so you get an idea of how much work went into this aircraft. So we've got new walls, so the sort of window frame, textures and all around where the EFB is, they're brand new, remodeled, retextured just to look that little bit better. We've got new windows, new window textures. We've got heating elements that are in the windows that you can now see, little stickers that are on the windows, all accurately modeled from the real aircraft. You've got new floor textures. You've got new seat textures, which come from an Airbus A320 family style. So we're getting stuff from the modern Airbus family aircraft, finally. But that's how they are in the Beluga. We've got the modern ISIS standby instrument, fully modelled in 3D, textured. Quite a lot of work went into that. You've got the movement of some instrumentation in the flight deck. So the flat position indicator has been moved around. A few other things have been moved around in general on the main instrument panel. Brand new textures for those. Brand new textures for the flight control unit with even more clarity and depth. The pedestal moving down, top of the pedestal, remove the ILS box. We'll come to that where you tune it in because it's done via a different manner. New textures again on those. The IDC, which is the radio that we're going to come to, brand new textures, all new textures for that, and you have to obviously make each button and all that sort of work. It's effectively the same work as mapping an entire brand new MCDU. That's all there, all functional and brand new. New floor textures. We'll be moving on soon, but we've got cargo area textures, 3D cargo area textures above, loading animations, loading objects, all modeled in 3D, and they are persistent. We're going to look at those afterwards. I'm just going to get you excited to stick along with the video. Overhead changes, massive changes to the overhead. So these massive changes to the overhead, if you know the A300 really well, you can see that the fuel panel's been changed, air conditioning panel's been completely changed, compartment smoke detector's been changed, the call bell page has been changed, the ventilation panel has been moved, another panel's been added in, pressurization system panel changes, all of these, and then they've all been retextured as well to bring it up to an even higher standard than what we had in the A300. So really, I've just spent the last 3 or 4 minutes just saying change, 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 new, change. You can get an idea that this is a lot of work, and it's really reflected in the quality of the product. This is a proper representation of the Beluga. This is not just some changes. This is basically a brand new aircraft in terms of what we had to do in terms of the 3D. So now we've got that, let's start up the aircraft and start looking over the systems and start going through all the super unique details of this, because I haven't even started scratching the surface. Okay, so here we are in the flight deck, powered up on the ground power unit, as I said, on the apron in Chester. So what are some of the more changes that you can see? Well, first of all, let's look at the flight control unit. Remember I said that button that doesn't work anymore? It is indeed the profile button. Now, what is profile in the A300? Same as the Beluga, obviously. It is VNAV. It doesn't work at all in this aircraft. You can press it, it will do nothing. So that has a very large impact on how you have to operate this aircraft. So you have no cost index. Doesn't make a difference because the speed, that the FMS flew based on the cost index was only accessible when you're in profile mode. So you can put cost index 1,000,000, 2, 1, 0, it doesn't matter, it's not going to fly that speed anyway. It also means that when you come to the top of descent, yes, you do have a top of descent and a top of climb arrow, but they're not accurate, which is true to the real aircraft. We'll come to that in a moment. You can't just press profile. You have to either do it in vertical speed, which is what I highly recommend, or level change, which I don't recommend because this aircraft has an apocalyptic amount of drag. A level change will probably always descend you a bit too quick. So we'll come to that when we get into the flying elements. So that is a big impact. Why did Airbus do this? Or CETA? I keep saying Airbus, but we're going to, you know what I mean. We talked about the history section of it before. So it's because they knew that this was only going to be an extremely short run aircraft. They only built 5. So realistically, who cares? Is the profile mode optimized for this aircraft? No. So they just disable it then. We're not going to take the time to flight test, modify, change, all this sort of stuff, all money down the drain, so that pilots who fly this can have a slightly easier time. Just do it manually. And that's the view that this whole aircraft takes. So let's move on to the ultimate weirdness of the A300, and we need to move slightly down. You might have noticed it with your keen eye above the thrust lever, but let's take a look. So here we are with the strangest feature and quirk of the Beluga. This is very, very, very strange. So you might ask yourself, why is this card here? Well, what this is a takeoff, and a really nice feature is you can toggle it to a landing card. Now you can see on the landing card it's already got our VREF, VAP and all this sort of stuff, but let's stick to the takeoff card. You can hear there's a little sound of paper being flipped when you do that. It's really nice. Now, why is this here? Well, the FMS inside the Beluga is from an A310. I'll let that sink in for a moment. So aerodynamically, it thinks it's flying an A310, but it's actually in an enormous Beluga with massive amounts of drag. Now what does this mean? This means that all of the speeds that you can see, F speed, S speed, green dot speed, these here, note they do not match the speeds on the card. The speeds on the card are the correct speeds. The speeds in the FMS are wrong, including, if we go to approach, so it wants an approach speed of 139 knots, and the actual approach speed is 134. Not massive, but come on, it's still a difference, right? It's still a reasonable difference that's going on there, and these maneuvering speeds, like I said, are the ones that are sort of the most different. So let's go back to this. So what else does this affect? As I mentioned, top of climb, top of descent, they're all based on if it's an A310. Fuel prediction, completely wrong. You're not going to get the correct information from it because it thinks it's in an A310. It's going to sit here and go, yeah, you're going to have 9 tons on arrival. And as you go through the flight, it's going to go, oh, hang on, this is quite a draggy A310 that I'm in. But very, very, very strange. Where do these cards come from? Well, in the real aircraft, it's a 3-person flight deck. Captain, first officer, loadmaster. The loadmaster fills these in for the approach and for the takeoff from a big paper manual. They literally write them in. How our system works is it's constantly just displaying the speeds based on your current weight. Even if you haven't typed it in, it's just taking the weight that it can see inside the sim and displaying them to you. So all you need to do is read the information off this and use it, but you can't use the speeds that are in the FMS. Now, how do you get your V1 and all the other information on there? Well, what we've done is we've taken a feature that we had on the A300, the send to FMS. You can still do that, or you can send it to the card, and it will then populate the card with all of the takeoff information. So let's have a look at that now. Okay, so here we are looking at the card now. It's had the information sent across from the EFB. The EFB works exactly the same way as the A300. It uses all specific Beluga information, so the takeoff performance is completely changed as well, and it actually gives you more accurate information than the A300 did. And you can use a much wider variety of flaps, so you can choose whatever flap setting for whatever runway length, unless you physically can't make it. But here is the speeds on the card, and you can see it's kind of in like a handwritten form, and you can read them from that. Super cool feature. So just to summarize, your approach speed is wrong in the FMS. You must read it from the card. You can toggle between the card with landing and takeoff like this. you can send the data to the card, your fuel prediction will be wrong, your top of descent will be wrong, your top of climb will be wrong, and basically every piece of guidance information from the FMS is wrong. Luckily it's conservative. What do I mean by this? Well, you have way more drag than you thought, so if you start your descent where it thinks it is, you're going to be easily in time to do it. It's not going to leave you high, for example. So let's move on, but what a weird feature, right? Okay, welcome to the IDC. Now this is a really interesting piece of equipment that you're going to operate in the Beluga. It's specific only to the Beluga. I believe it's the only Airbus ever to be fitted with this radio panel, which is the IDC radio panel from Rockwell Collins, and it's kind of a retrofit in here that they made in the early to mid 2000s, I believe. So let's get straight into how to use this thing, because it's kind of interesting. If you just want to type in a frequency like 122.80, you just type it in, put it in, boom, you're in COM 1. Let's say 121.8, put that in standby, and then you can swap between the two. Simple as that. Exactly the same for COM 2, exactly the same for the ILS, exactly the same for the course, the ATC, ADF, blah blah blah. That makes the most sense, and that's really straightforward. And that's pretty much how you're going to interact with it 98-99% of the time. But it has a really cool feature called a preset feature. Now if there's ever an aircraft on the planet that might take advantage of this preset function more than others, it's the Beluga. Because we've talked about the Beluga has a wide, extensive network that you can fly it on, but they're mainly legacy routes or routes it did a few times or charters, etc. But its day-to-day operations is fairly consistent, same airports, same ILSs, etc, etc. So you'll be able to save these in your preset file, and they maintain between you closing and opening the sim, so they'll stay there forever until you delete them, basically. So let's make a preset in COM 1 and let's try and recall it and see how that all works. So in COM 1 you can see I've already got test 1 and test 2. So let's make test 3 and see how that goes. So we're going to do 122.5, and then I'm going to do slash, and then I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it test space 3. Save it. Now I've got test 1, test 2, test 3. Now how do I recall any of these? Now if you look on the right hand side, you have 1, 2, 3. So this is preset 1, preset 2, preset 3. So I'm going to recall preset 3, the one we just made. So I'm going to type P3 COM 1, boom, we have it in there. Let's take preset 1, P1, so we're expecting 121.6, and that's exactly what we get. Pretty simple. You can have up to 5 pages of these, save them as you wish. And the better way of using the preset, in terms of if you actually remember what they are, you give them their proper names. On the main tune page, remember we said P3, so we can type in this, COM 1, boom, and it recalls that preset that we made. So that's basically how the preset works for the COM. Now for the ILS, it's a little bit more complex. Now you can see this is page 3 of 5, so we have a fair few pages in here. These are just ones that we were doing for testing, but after the 5th page basically it's full and you have to start deleting them, and you delete them by clicking clear like that, and that's it, simple as gone. Now let's make a preset for Chester's ILS, which is definitely one this aircraft's going to fly quite a lot. So I'm going to cheat, just going to open up the map in X-Plane, and we're going to have a look for ILS 22, which is there, which is 110.35, then we do slash, and now we type in the course 222, then I do a space, and now I do the IATA, which is weird, right? Not Echo Golf November Romeo, the ICAO code, we do the IATA, and I think it's Charlie Echo Golf, I think. Could be wrong on that, but it doesn't really matter, it's just looking for a 3-letter code. Space, the runway, 22. So frequency, course, space, IATA, space, runway. Boom, gone in there. So we've got the correct frequency, that's all in there, preset number 9. So let's try it now. P9, boom. We get the frequency, we get the course. Let's just pick another random one so we have it changed. There we go. So let's go back onto the tune page. So where this can be super helpful is, imagine we were approaching the ILS into Chester. We were approaching the ILS runway 04. And they said, well, actually the winds have changed. It's now going to be ILS runway 22. And you think, oh, I remember. Preset 9 is my ILS for runway 22, because you're going to be flying fairly similar aircraft all the time. So you go P9, ILS, done. Frequency's in, course is in, you're ready to go. That's it, simple as that. ATC works the same way. To access the more in-depth menu, you click this, and you can do the GPWS test by pressing this button. I'm not going to press it because it's a long test and it makes a lot of noise. This is how you swap between systems. This is how you ident. Make sure you put traffic to on. If traffic is off, you won't see traffic on your little TCAS window, so it needs to be on and above, norm and below, and that's how you control it. That is basically all of the tuning functions, and they are the primary functions of the IDC. There are a few quick option menus, so this one here, so TARA, TA only, alt on, alt off, or standby. So they made that so you can just toggle through it, so you don't have to go into a sub menu, which is nice. To ident, I find this a bit awkward when you're on the network, because someone says, you know, whatever. Ident, you're like, oh, click. It's kind of 2 clicks, whereas on the original panel it's just 1. But you know, pros and cons to both sides of it. I really like the system in general for the preset. It's super cool. So let's move on to a really nice piece of technology that we've been able to integrate into this IDC, which will make your flights a lot easier. Okay, and now we're going to come on to one of the coolest features. I'm definitely running out of time, so I'm going to try and go through this pretty quick, but it's an awesome feature. So, as you can see, we're on the main tune page of the IDC. If we click on ACARS menu, you can see it brings up a little interface that we've put together. So, we've got 2 options: SimBrief username, company route request, and win request. Now, what does this mean? Well, you can input your SimBrief username via the EFB settings menu by simply typing it in, clicking save, and that's what comes across. Obviously my username is not test123. If that is your username, I'm terribly sorry, but that's what we put in there. So once you've got that in, all you have to do, go on the SimBrief website, make your flight, so you just, from wherever to wherever, there's already a Beluga airframe that you can choose, and dispatch the flight. So once you've created the flight plan. Now, you don't really need SimBrief after that, so what you can do is you can come back into the aircraft, and all you need to do is click this button here, the company route request. And what it will do is it will automatically download the route file, insert it into the flight plan folder, uplink it to the FMS, and call sign and all the other information that will be available from SimBrief. Now, what else can you do? Well, let's check it out. You can click wind data request. So let's try that now. So what you can do is it will wait, it will try and look for the wind. Once it's found the wind, it will say ACARS wind data received, and it'll insert the wind data. If it doesn't find any, it just inserts nothing. But in the case of where you have a valid username in there, it will uplink the SimBrief wind, not the X-plane wind, and that gives you very accurate cruise and wind information throughout the entire flight. So a really cool feature. Let's see how it's uplinked the route that I've requested. Okay, so now we're looking at the FMS, and as you can see, it says company route uplink done, so we can clear that message, and you can see it's Echo Golf November Romeo to Toulouse. It's already taken a cost index. We already said that that's not valid in this case because we can't use profile mode, but it's still uplinked it. It's given us the cruise level, our call sign, the tropopause, and the wind has already gone in there, and the whole routing. We can have a look at it now quickly. So if we go through the route, there's no SIDS and stars, but you can see the entire route has been put in here now. It's super helpful. Everything's in there for you to go through. So again, all you have to do, go on SimBrief, make the flight plan, make sure it's dispatched, come in here, click route request, wait, the sim might pause, it'll uplink everything to your FMS, then click win request, and boom, your route and your win all in there, all in one go. So let's move on to the overhead system changes, and then we'll move on to the 3D loading, which is the best bit of the whole aircraft. Okay, so we're going to try and get through the overhead as quick as possible, because these are just changes to how the systems operate, and we change the logic behind them. Nothing too interesting other than the air conditioning panel, so that's the one we're going to focus on. Fuel panel, they just removed the trim tank and the CGCC, so all that sort of trim tank control, all gone. You also will not see the center of gravity and the gross weight on the lower ND anymore. That's been removed because the center of gravity control computer, that's all it was there for, so it's gone, so it's not needed. Like I mentioned on the overview, lots of other 3D changes, like one of the outflow valves has been removed on the pressurization page, and the system has been updated to match that, as long as the system SD page as well. But the only one that's kind of a bit quirky and interesting is the air conditioning page. Now why? Well, like I say, let's quickly get through this. So turn the bleed on. Now you can see that the bleed's come on, it's gone in line green, and it's turned on pack 1. Now pack 2 is off. But why is pack 2 off? Well, you have this thing called a pack selector. So if you notice, you either have pack 2 or pack 1 controlling the aircraft. You don't have both, because the area that we're in is so small for pressurization, it doesn't need both packs. If it had both packs, it's too much. So that's why you either have 1 or 2, not both. And that's what this selector up here does. You can see it swapping between, and you can see the pressure changing. Max cool, and the pack valves just turns them off, same with the ram air. You've only got the one selector here for temperature, which makes sense, and that is shown on the combined doors and air conditioning page, which has a pretty cool symbol of the Beluga on it. So we did that as well, matching the real aircraft. This toggles between showing you the temperature on the compartment selector and the cockpit. It's normally a rotary knob on the A300, but as you can probably work out, there's only one selector, so they just made it a toggle switch. For the overhead, there are a few more things, but I don't want to get bogged down with it now. I want to move on to the coolest area of the aircraft, which is the 3D loading. So let's move on to that right now. Okay, so now we're going to move on to probably the most interesting thing that we've been able to do with the Beluga, and I have to tell you, it's really good fun, and it's really cool. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's fun and cool, and there's a good combination. So you can see on the ground controls page we now have load sheet and ground services and exits. Same thing as the A300. Not going to go through it again. The only difference is on the load sheet page, it's a preset loads, so you can choose the loads we're going to look at in a second, or random. Random means you can just type in how much payload you want the aircraft to have, so you can full weight, empty weight, whatever. It's up to you. Now let's move on to the ground services. Looks fairly similar as before, apart from we've got the oversized sort of Beluga look down on there. Now let's move on to the interesting bit, loader. Now you can see on this drop down we've got quite a few options with the weights associated with them. So we've got an Airbus fuselage, Airbus wings, helicopter, space station, random cargo, and Airbus A380 tail. Now let me explain to you what you can do with these, because it is really cool. You can select these, a loader, real size, real scale, 100% accurate loader will come in front of the aircraft. It will have what you asked on there loaded on top. It will approach the aircraft, the door will open, the loader will come up to the aircraft. It will physically, on your command, the load and unload, we'll get there in a minute, will physically load the thing into the airframe. The door will close behind it, and you will be able to fly with that payload inside your aircraft. So in the cruise, if you pop your head up into the deck, it'll be there. And when you land, you can open the door, pull the loader back up, unload, and watch the payload come out of the whole cargo area. Now, remember what I was saying back in the beginning, that we wanted to do the Beluga, but do it properly, do it justice. This is what the mission for the Beluga is. It is carrying oversized, strange payloads all over Europe, and in fact all over the world. And that nicely brings me on to some of the options we have here. So the fuselage is an A320 fuselage. The wings, again, they're two A320 wings, I believe. Could be wrong on that one. Helicopter. Now, the Beluga has carried helicopters multiple times because it's actually pretty easy. You take the blades off and it just fits right in. And they flew one all the way from Europe to Australia for an air show once. So you can simulate those operations here by loading in the helicopter. You've got the correct weight. It's even the correct weight, because we managed to find research based on that, and fly it all the way to Australia with the correct repaint on, because that'll be available with the aircraft as well. Space Station. You're probably going, what on earth are you on about? Now this is probably my favourite mission that the Beluga ever did. Now if you've ever seen the International Space Station, it has a thing called Node 3, or the Tranquility Module. And you're going to go, never seen that, but you might have. It's the one with all the big windows that you look out of, and you can see all those fantastic pictures that people take. That's the module. And it was built in a factory in Turin. They flew it from Turin to Bremen, from Bremen to Iceland, from Iceland to Bangor, direct to the shuttle landing facility, and they unloaded it there and loaded it onto the space shuttle, transported in the Beluga. So we have 3D modeled that, put the correct repaints on the outside, and that is the correct weight, 18.2 tons, which is pretty heavy. Maximum weight that the Beluga can carry is 40, and that's a common misconception. Most of the Beluga's payloads, if you can see, they're not that heavy. They're just really, really big. It's designed to take big things, not heavy things, because when you load it up really, really heavy, its range is horrendous. But at a light load, it's around 2,500 miles, something like that. Full weight, it's around 900 miles, which is pretty poor, because that's because it just can't take enough weight, not because it's burning so much fuel. But we'll get onto that later. So let's try this. Let's take an A380 tail, load it in, close the door, remove the loader, and see what that looks like. So here you can start to see the main door opening up, and you can hear that electrical motor whining away some part of the custom sound assets that we have made for the Beluga, and you can start to get a look at that incredible 3D interior. It is honestly mind-blowing. I've been hiding it the whole video because it's so good. On the left-hand side of the frame, you can see the loader starting to pull up, and now you can hear that it's started to go into its lift phase. So it's pulled up next to the aircraft, it lifts up, and then it presents itself, so it brings this front right up next to the aircraft here, and in fact loads the cargo over the head of the pilots, but the door still is not finished opening. But let's just give that a listen for a second. Okay, so now you can truly get a view of how massive this cargo area is. You can hear the pump still whining to open the door, and you can actually see that the engines, the spinners, aren't spinning because the wind is now calm. We actually have a feature where they windmill on the ground now. Behind us you can hear the loaders getting ready to load in. You can hear it just reach the top of his extension after it made that noise. Door's still not fully open yet, but just take a look inside. So here's another really great view, and what you can see here is this is obviously an Etihad 380 tail. We have a few files already that's going to give multiple different repaints for these tails that you can drop in, so you can transport whichever tails that you want to, recreate when an airline received the components for a 380, whatever. There's just so many options that you can do with this. And you can see now the loader is now pulling up to the front of the Beluga, and you can start to see now how that sort of sharp edge at the front of the Beluga is going to match exactly with the loader there. And once they're fully established, I'll go back into the flight deck to show you that on the EFB you need to just press the load command and it will load in. Now this whole loading process is going to be available inside the building to my right hand side in the Chester scenery, made by $0 Payware and commissioned by iniBuilds. So you'll be able to do this inside, with the doors will open and close to the hangar, which will be able to be controlled via SAM, and this whole process, as you see here, will take just like they do in reality, which is just, honestly, there's so many elements to this product. It's a plane, it's a loader, it's a scenery, the scenery interacts with the plane. Honestly, there's so much, it's so much fun. So let's go back into the flight deck now and select to load this tail into the aircraft. So you can see I've just got this view a little bit pulled back, and it's actually really cool because you can see that the loader sits right around the flight deck, because the load is about to go over the top of our head. So what we have to do is we selected the A380 tail and we just simply click load. And now what's going to happen is it takes a while, but they start getting the load ready and it will start to be loaded into the aircraft itself. So let's go take a look at that. Alright, so you can hear that the loader started to make a different noise. It means it's about to sort of initialize the conveyor belt to move the aircraft in. Now in real life, this whole loading procedure takes around about 35 minutes. So things have been sped up a little bit just because I don't think you want to particularly sit here for 35 minutes and wait for the whole thing to proceed. So here it comes into the aircraft now, so you can start to see that the tail's being loaded in, which it still never ceases to amaze me. That's a full-size A380 tail that's getting loaded into our aircraft and will stay there throughout the entire flight. And as I said, you can do the same thing with the wings, with the fuselage, with the space station, with the helicopter, with the boxes, and with the random cargo. So here it comes into the aircraft, and shortly I'll wait for it to stop. Now, you might have seen that on the right hand side there's sort of a bit of a control panel down there. Now that's fully interactive as well. You can open and close the cockpit door, and that's the way that you actually turn on the lights in this area at night. So that's more of an interactive element that you can use if you really want to go that next level. We'll take a look at that a bit later on. So the tail's loaded in, and now what will happen is the loader will sit there waiting for our command to remove the loader. So let's go and do that. Okay, so you can see that now all I have to do is click remove loader, and what it will do is it will start to pull the loader away and close the door. If you cast your eye over down to this page here, you'll see that the cargo door has gone amber or yellow, whichever you want to say it, and that shows that the actual front cargo door is open and unlocked. And we also get on the left hand side the associated warning message to say that the door is not closed. But remember, it's not actually pressurized, so it doesn't really matter if it fully locks. I mean, you'll want it to fully lock, you definitely don't want that opening in flight, but it's not pressurized. The only bit is the flight deck, so something to keep in mind. So now we'll just wait for it all to pull back and for the door to close, and we'll go and check on the cargo. But we're going to take the real route. Now what do I mean by that? We're going to walk at the back of the flight deck, we're going to open the pressurized door, and we're going to go through the hatch in the flight deck door and have a look at the load sitting inside with the door closed, because we can do that. So here we are looking at that rear pressure door, which is the cockpit entrance door. So we're going to go walk out there, walk up the stairs and check on our load to see if it's all good and secure and nice up there, and we could do this throughout flight obviously. Now this door, once the aircraft is pressurized, isn't going to open because it's a pressure door. At the moment we're obviously on the ground, we're not pressurized, and it will open. But if you pressurize the plane on the ground, as I've shown in the tutorial videos before, it won't open because it's based on the real world system. So let's open the door, and now you can start to see into this sort of lower, I would call it like a transient area. So let's go and take a look in there and see what's going on. Right, so we've popped our head through the door now and we're looking into this area. Now interestingly, this is a little bit lower than head height. It's not very tall in here. This is about the height of the cargo bay of a normal A300. So your head's kind of tilted over normally when you're actually in here. I just tilted my head. That doesn't really help, even though it's on video, but never mind. So how do we get in and out of the aircraft? That's pretty unique. So what we can do is we can lean up and we can press this handle, and as you can see, the service door, as they call it, comes open. We just heard the ding from the ECAM in there to say that the service door is open, and this is how you get in and out of the aircraft. There is no door on the side, but remember, this whole area again is not pressurized. That's what kind of looks like this utilitarian look. We're not going to go outside, remember. We said that we're going to go and check on the cargo load, so let's go do that now. Right, so we've moved our head just next to the ladder, so what we can do is we can actually click on the hatch and come open, and we can already see a bit of the tail up there. So you can start to see how in the flight deck you can almost see straight into where the tail is, and we're going to walk up this ladder and have a look at what's going on inside the load. Okay, so I've just come up through the access hatch to have a look and walk back a bit and squatted down. So now you can see the 380's tail is there in place inside the Beluga, the door's closed, and we're ready to taxi out basically. It's just one of those things that is super cool. This is inside the aircraft. Okay, you join us holding short on runway 22 in Chester, ready for departure. So we're going to talk about the differences of flying a departure in the Beluga versus the normal A300. Now if I'm being pedantic, there are no differences between the types. The only difference is we're doing a non-profile takeoff in the Beluga every single time, as profile doesn't work, which you can see here. It is inop, as the button suggests. So this is just a non-profile takeoff procedure, but I know not many people do that, so let's talk about it now. So you must set runway heading. We have nav armed, which we can see in blue. We have a preset speed of 250 knots, that's fine, or your first restriction, or green dot plus 20 I believe is another restriction as well, but we're just going to go with 250 knots just to keep this simple. Then what we're going to do is we're going to press the toga button, or the go levers as they're called in the A300. Engines are going to take up, half stick forward, 80 knots, start releasing the stick, so neutral by 100 knots, V1, rotate off the ground. Once we're in the air, I'll be quite lazy, put the autopilot in quite soon, maybe even before the gear. Not 100% real, but when you're recording you need to reduce your workload as quick as possible. And then we're waiting for 1,000 feet, because that's our acceleration altitude. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. In the normal A300, when you use profile, it accelerates automatically. We must manually press level change when we're at 1,000 feet, or vertical speed or something. We must revert the mode, but level change is what the norm of what you would use, and it will manually start to accelerate to 250 knots because that is our preset speed. We must, and this is the one that I always get wrong, we must manually set climb on the TRP. It's not going to do it automatically anymore because auto doesn't have any function because profile isn't there. We're doing a flex takeoff, and then at 1,000 feet, once again, level change, climb on the TRP, we make sure it gets 250 knots. Quite a lot to do, let's go fly it. And the other thing that we need to remember are the speeds that we see, the F, the green dot, and the S speed. They are actually incorrect. The correct speeds are on the paper, if we think back to that. But let's go and see what happens. Let's go. So, half stick forward, we've got thrust, SRS, runway. Thrust is coming up. Looking for the target of 94% N1. You can hear those wonderful new sounds. Thrust is set, 100 knots. V1, rotate. Trim, positive climb, gear up, lazy man, autopilot 1. See, it's now following in nav, 1,000 feet, level change, climb on the TRP, remember to do that, and now you can hear the thrusters come back to climb. It's turning automatically at that waypoint to climb towards Wrexham. We're accelerating away above F speed, and remember our actual F speed is slightly lower than that, but that's fine, so we'll go flaps 15-0. S speed showing as 180, that's also fine. And now we will go flaps 0. We're climbing, and you can see that we are climbing very quickly. The Beluga, gear to neutral, spoilers to disarmed. As you can see, it still climbs like a rocket because the Beluga may be very, very strange looking aircraft, but it's still got enormously powerful engines, and we basically took off there with only 2.5 tons on board, as we've got the tail and only 11 tons of fuel, so pretty close to being quite empty. Now, one thing I want to show you is we've put in brand new nav code into the aircraft. Now, what do I mean by that? All of the old nav code has been removed, and it's a brand new system which is much more sophisticated and will actually mean if you ever saw it randomly turning left then right, that should go away entirely, and the whole tracking should be considerably more accurate. As you can see, starting the turn now, a little bit early, but actually you'll see that it will get it spot on. So it's rolling and it's holding that bank consistently. We're going 0.2 there, and then we're going to start to roll out shortly, and you can just see how it's a bit more confident than the old system as it slowly starts to roll out precisely on track. Now remember, we have to manually accelerate the aircraft up because it's no profile. Profile's not going to do anything, so I have to put 280 knots. That's going to be our climb speed today. Maximum speed is 295 knots. Maximum Mach is 0.7. Okay, so what I want to talk about in this latter stage of the climb is the flight model. We've got a brand new flight model, nothing left from the original A300s, using the experimental flight model inside X-Plane, so you need to make sure that that's toggled on. It will give you a reminder if that's not the case. Now this gives you a bit more accuracy across the board. It makes the aircraft a bit smoother to fly, and we've also refined the whole flight model a lot. So this actually has a very, very accurate flight model, even though it's the Beluga. And I just think, just give it a try, see what you think when you fly it, and you can see that new nav code now doing a fantastic job en route. Like I say, rolling and then slowly rolling out and just doing really, really nice job. So yeah, a lot of time put into the flight model so you can fly the correct pitch, correct angle of attack, correct fuel burn. Everything has been corrected specifically for the Beluga. There is nothing left over from the A300, and it takes it to that next generation of what we want to try and achieve with flight modeling. So it's not just like the A300, it's a step up, and I hope you'll see that when you do fly it. Right, so you join us back at flight level 230, so we're in our initial cruise. We're going to be stepping up to flight level 280 momentarily, but we're getting to the end of the video, and I just want to start to wrap it up really, and with the closing thoughts. First thing I want to make a commitment to is all of these things that you're seeing on the Beluga, they are going to be rolled back into the A300. So this isn't something that you specifically with the Beluga, but eventually they're going to be rolled back into the A300 once we have completed the A310 and we go back and revisit the A300. So you will see these improvements in the A300 down the line. So let's step our flight cruise up to flight level 280, level change. And one other thing I want to show you is the altimeter scrolling animation. We completely redid that as well, because I know a lot of you wanted it to be a bit smoother, and you can see that the ISIS has a custom animation for that as well, where it rolls over the hundreds and the thousands, so that's in there now as well. So really, what are the closing things that I have to say about the Beluga? I hope you can see from this video that we've really done the Beluga justice. It's got new everything. That's my best description, and really I hope you can pick it up, try it and see what you think. You've got a worldwide route network to fly this thing around. If you're flying in Asia or Europe or America or wherever, there's all these specialty cargo routes, and everywhere there's something to do with the aircraft, and we've really stepped it up to that next level. So thank you very much for watching the video, and we do hope to see you on the next video we publish on this channel. Thanks again.